We begin today the Gemara on Daf Yud Chesam with Beis, the last line. We're in the sugya of Bikurim. Sagt the Gemara, Omar Rave Bar Ada Omar Rav Yitzchak. Bikurim, bringing the Bikurim to the Beis Hamikdash. Me'emesai, mechayvin or chayavin aleyen. From what point would a zar that is not supposed to eat from the Bikurim, from what point would he be chayiv misa b'dei shemayim if he eats from these Bikurim? That's Rashi's pshat in the Gemara. So the Gemara says, Mishayiro Pnei Abayis, when it sees the face of the Beis Hamikdash, which would mean when it's brought into the Azara of the Beis Hamikdash. Says the Gemara, Keman, according to whose opinion is this, Ki Hai Tana, like the Tana in this Braisa. The Tanya we learned in the Braisa, Rabbi Eliezer says that with Bikurim, Miktsasam b'chutz and Miktsasam b'fnim. You have a basket of Bikurim, and you brought it partially into the Azara. Half is inside and half is outside. Shebachotz, whatever part of it is outside, harehen kechulin. They are still like chulin, and a zar that eats from it is not chayiv misa. L'chol devreim, or for whatever matter that pertains to. Shebifnim, the part of the basket that's inside, harehen kehektish l'chol devreim. That part is hektish for every matter, and therefore he would be chayiv misa b'dei shemayim if he's a zar that eats from it. Another halacha b'negei to bikurim. This was actually discussed before in the Gemara Barichas. Rav Sheishes said, Bikurim hanoche ma'akeves behen. By the mitzvah Bikurim, placing it down in front of the mizbeach holds back the kohen from eating from it. That must be done. Kriya e ma'akeves behen. But reading the psukim that it says in the Torah, that's not ma'akev. Says the Gemara, Keman, according to whose opinion is this? So the Mefarshim point out that we already had in the Gemara before. It brought Tanaim from Rises that hold like this. But here the Gemara asks and brings another source. Kehai Tana. The source is from the Tana in this Braisa.
What's the connection of Sheshes to the Gemara before?
To the Gemara before that we just learned? No, there isn't a connection. It's another halacha. Okay, so according to who is this? Kehai Tana, according to the Tana here in this Braisa. The Tanya Rabbi Yosi Aimer. Rabbi Yosi says, Shloisha Dvarim, there are three halachas that he taught, Mishum Shloisha Zekenim, in the name of three Zekenim. So this is a Braisa where the Gemara doesn't quote fully. It's quoted only, one of the halachas are brought here, the other two halachas are not mentioned. So one of those halachas is regarding Bikurim. Rabbi Shmuel says, Yachol, I would think, Yala Odam Ma'aseh Bizman Hazeh B'Yerushalayim V'Yichlenu. That even today, if a person separates Ma'aseh Sheni, which means that Rabbi Shmuel, the Tana in this Braisa, he holds that the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael remains even after the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore the halachis of Trumas and Maisres all apply, and you have to separate the Ma'aseh Sheni. But now, I would think that means, what do you do with the Ma'aseh Sheni? You bring it to Yerushalayim, even if you don't redeem it, you bring it to Yerushalayim, and you eat it there in Yerushalayim, like it was in the time when the Beis HaMikdash is standing. Even though there's no Beis HaMikdash, but nevertheless, in Yerushalayim, it's Lefnei Hashem, you can eat there the Ma'aseh Sheni. And you eat it there. And so the Braisa says, Rabbi Shmuel said, Vidinu. No, it's the Kal V'chaimer that we learn out that we don't do this. Why is this? Because, or I don't know if it's a Kal V'chaimer, or we compare to B'chair. What do we compare? B'chair ta'an avos mokim. The B'chair, the firstborn that's brought to the Beis HaMikdash, you have to bring it to the Beis HaMikdash, you spray the blood on the Mizbeach, and you burn some of it, and then the Kayin is the one that eats the B'chair. So it has to be brought to the Beis HaMikdash. And the Ma'aseh Sheni has to also be brought to Yerushalayim. So Ma B'chair Eina Ela B'fnei Abayis, just like with the B'chair, it's only when the Beis HaMikdash is standing. Af Meiser Eina Ela B'fnei Abayis. The same with Meiser, eating Meiser in Yerushalayim, it's only when the Beis HaMikdash is standing. Otherwise, Yerushalayim, it doesn't have the Kedusha of the city anymore, and you don't eat the Ma'aseh Sheni in Yerushalayim. Which means that Bizman Hazeh, when the Ma'aseh Sheni is separated, you redeem the Ma'aseh Sheni. You redeem it with Shava Pruta, and then the rest of the produce you eat. But you can't bring it to Yerushalayim and eat it there, because you can learn from B'chair that just like B'chair, you don't have Bizman Hazeh, so too with Meiser. Okay, now the Gemara is still going to bring the source regarding B'chair itself. From where do we know that by B'chair itself, that the Bizman Hazeh, it can't be eaten over there b'fnei Abayis? We'll see. Okay, but the Gemara asks, how can you learn out Ma'aseh Sheni from B'chair? Ma leB'chair shekein ton matan domim ve'emurim legavim mizbeach. By B'chair, obviously, it's only when the Beis Hamikdash is standing. Because the Bechor, you bring it to the Mizbeach, it's shechted, you spray the blood on the Mizbeach, and there are the fats that are burnt in the Mizbeach, so that doesn't apply today. So what do you do with a Bechor today? By a Bechor today, you have to leave it and wait until it gets a mum, and then once it gets a mum, the Kohen just eats it. So the Braisa says, Bikurim yichichu, we could learn out from Bikurim to Ma'aseh Sheni, that just like Bikurim is not Bizman Hazeh, so too Ma'aseh Sheni is not Bizman Hazeh. Says the Gemara, but Ma'ale Bikurim, Shekain Tun and Hanocha. By Bikurim, the Pasuk says that you have to place it in front of the Mizbeach, and therefore it doesn't apply when there's no Beis Hamikdash and there's no Mizbeach. How can you learn out from there to Ma'aseh Sheni? Talmud Laimar, so the Braisa concludes, we learn it with a hekish in the lashon of the pasuk, because it says V'chalta lefnei Hashem Elokecha v'gomer. In the continuation of the pasuk, it mentions Meiser the Gancha Tireish Chavitzarecha, and right afterwards it mentions the Bechor is Bekarcha. So it mentions Meiser and Bechor together. And therefore, Makish, Meiser leBechor, we compare Meiser to Bechor. Ma Bechor ein elo lefnei Abayis. Bechor is only when the Beis Hamikdash is standing. Av Meiser, you could only eat it in Yerushalayim, ein elo lefnei Abayis, when the Beis Hamikdash is standing. But afterwards, after the Churban, the Kedusha of Yerushalayim, it's not considered to be lefnei Hashem Elokecha. So you don't eat the Ma'aseh Sheni in Yerushalayim. Till there is the lashon of this Braisa. Now, when it brought the idea of learning out Ma'aseh Sheni from Bikurim, what did it say? Why can't you learn out Ma'aseh Sheni from Bikurim? Because Bikurim needs to be placed Hanocha in front of the Mizbeach. Now, if it would be true that would Bikurim, it's not only to be placed in front of the Mizbeach, but there's also a din of Kriya, that you have to read the Psukim there. So Lifraich, the Perche should have been Ma'ale Bikurim Shekain Tunen Kriya ve'Hanocha. By Bikurim, you need two things, as the Psukim have to be read and you place it on. So from the fact that the Tana of this Braisa didn't mention the Kriya, the reading of the Psukim, this is a Tana that holds that the Kriya of the Psukim is not Ma'akiv. And therefore he didn't mention this. This was the Raya that Rav Sheshes brought. Amar Ravashi, so Ravashi says in this, Nehidi kuveleke, even if the reading of the Psukim is not a must, it's not Ma'akiv, but mitzvah bileke, isn't there a mitzvah to read the Psukim? So therefore, v'leime mitzvah v'lifroich. The Tana of the Braisa should have still, Rabbi Shmuel, he should have still brought the union of reading the Psukim, because it's not takama'akev, but at least it's a mitzvah. So that could also be a pirche, that Bikurim is different than Ma'aseh Sheni. So the fact that it's still a question. Why, even if it's not ma'akev, why didn't he mention the kriya of the Psukim? Okay, because it's not ma'akiv. Because it's not ma'akiv. Yeah, okay. The Aruch Laner, other Achronim ask that the question of Ravashi is a shvera shaila. Sof if it's not ma'akiv, so that's why he doesn't mention it. It's only Hanoch is ma'akiv. Okay, but looks like Rav Ashi hold it. No, even if it's only a mitzvah, it should have been mentioned. I think the Aruch Laner says that the Bikurim that we're talking about over here is the Bikurim that was separated when the Beis Hamikdash was standing, and then he didn't get a chance to bring it until after the Churban Abayis. In such a case, the Kriya actually is ma'akiv. It's a mitzvah, and you don't have to do it in a, like the Gemara said before, bila, if it's roy lebila, then ein bila ma'akeves. Ein roy lebila, then bila is ma'akeves. So that's, I think, how he explains the Gemara over here. Okay, let's go weiter. Elo Ravashi, so therefore Ravashi answers and explains a different reason. Another explanation why he didn't mention the Kriya of the Psukim. And that is because Kivin, the Ikke, Bikurei Hager, there's the Bikurim that Hager brings. The Boy Lemeima, when you read the Psukim, you have to say, Asher Nishpa Hashem Lavisenu, that we're thanking the Eibusher for the land that he gave us, that he promised to our ancestors. V'loi Motzi Amar, he can't say Avisenu. And therefore he doesn't read the Psukim. So therefore, this is not always the case that you must say the Psukim, or that it's a mitzvah to say the Psukim, so therefore it wasn't mentioned. Because there's a situation by Hager where it's not said. Okay, the emphasis is that we don't paskin like this day. It's a machlokes whether a ger can read the psukim or not. We paskin like the opinion that a ger could read the psukim because Avraham is av hamoin goyim and he's the av for the gerim and therefore he says all the psukim. But I think the Ritva here says that the Bikuri Ger is not the only exception. There are other cases that it says in the Mishnah in Masechta Bikurim who does not read psukim. You don't always read the psukim, and therefore it's not mentioned here as the pirche for the limud that it wants to learn out Ma'aseh Sheni from Bikurim. Now the Gemara has another question on what the Braisa said, what Rabbi Shmuel said in the Braisa. What did he say? We're trying to figure out whether Ma'aseh Sheni today, would you eat it in Yerushalayim or not? And it tried to learn out from Bechor, and it said a pircha you can't. Try to learn out from Bikurim, and it said another pircha you can't. And then it brought a hekish. So the Gemara is asking, why would you have to go to the hekish? Why not say that in such a case, if you can't learn out from one, you can learn out from both together? V'teisi b'meh hatzad. As we had before, over here in this Masechta and many times in Shas, the concept of ma'atzad hashavah shebehen, that if they both are different in one unique way, but there's a tzad hashavah. The common denominator is that these are two cases that you don't bring up as manazeh. And from there you learn out that by Ma'aseh Sheni as well, you don't need it in Yerushalayim as manazeh. And so the Gemara, no, you can't learn out from both of them together either, mishum de'ikele mifrach, because there's a pircha that both of them together are the same and different. And that is Malat Tzad HaShav Shebem, both together have the same point, Sheken Yesh Ben Tzad Mizbeach. They have something that has to be done with the Mizbeach, and therefore, by Ma'aseh Sheni, that the question is whether you just have to bring it to Yerushalayim and eat it there, but it has nothing to do with the Beis HaMikdash or the Mizbeach. How can you learn out from B'chayr or Bikurim? That if they are not done Bizman Hazeh, so Ma'aseh Sheni also not. They have a Tzad Mizbeach, they have to be done something with the Mizbeach. Okay, now the Gemara addresses what's the reason why the Tana of this Braisa starts off with a premise that it's obvious that when it comes to B'chayr, it's not Bizman Hazeh. So the Gemara Makos, what is the Tana of this Braisa hold? So before I mentioned that the Tana of this Braisa regarding the status of Eretz Yisrael B'chlal, his opinion is that Eretz Yisrael still has the Kedusha, and therefore he's discussing Ma'aseh Sheni, that there's an obligation to give Ma'aseh Sheni, and the question is, what do you do with this Ma'aseh Sheni? But now the question is, what is the opinion of this Tana regarding the status of the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash? If his opinion is Kedusha Rishayna, Kedusha Kitchel Shaita, Kitchel Asad Lavai, the first Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash, they were Mekadesh for that time, but it also remains for the future, which means even after the time of the Chorban, the Kedusha of the place of the Beis HaMikdash always remains. So then I'll fill a B'chayr Nami. If so, even in a B'chayr, you should also bring the B'chayr today, you could be makriv it, and then the Kohen eats from it. The Mandama that holds that the Kedusha remains even today, his opinion is that you can bring a carbon even if you don't have the Beis HaMikdash. So if so, you can bring the B'chayr today. So why is the Tana de Braisa saying that by B'chayr it's pasha that you can't bring today? Adarabah, you can bring today without a Beis HaMikdash. Okay, Taisus here adds though that you have to have a Mizbeach, you have to have the Sikis Adam, it's even if you don't have the Beis HaMikdash, but it's possible to bring the B'chayr today. So why is he saying that there's no B'chayr today as broad as a carbon? And Kesavar Kedusha Rishayna Kitchel Shaita, that the Kedusha of the place of the Beis HaMikdash was then for the time, but V'loy Kitchel Asad Lavai. But then afterwards, in the future, when the Chorban happened, the Kedusha does not remain. So then Afil B'chayr Nami Tiboy. If so, the same question you have about Ma'aseh Sheni should apply to B'chayr as well. That's Rashi's Gersa in the Gemara. And Rashi explains, what does the Gemara mean by this? L'chayr by B'chayr, if there's no Kedusha, you can't bring the carbon. Obviously, there's nothing to talk about B'negei to B'chayr being brought as a carbon and then the Kohen would eat it. So Rashi explains, the Gemara means to say that by B'chayr you should have the same shaila regarding Ma'aseh Sheni, that maybe it applies B'zman Hazeh, that the Kohen eats from it in a situation where B'chayr is similar to Ma'aseh Sheni, that you don't need the Mizbeach anymore. What is that case? If the B'chayr was already brought when the Beis HaMikdash was standing, and they sprayed the blood, and they were makriv on the Mizbeach, and then the Chorban happens, Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, and the basar for the Kohen to eat from the B'chayr, he still has it. The question is, now that the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, could he eat from the basar of that carbon in Yerushalayim? Does Yerushalayim still have that Kedusha, the place that you can eat from the carbon or not? So the same shaila you have about the Ma'aseh Sheni, in a similar situation by B'chayr, where you don't need the Mizbeach anymore, you should also have the same shaila. Why is the Braisa saying that by B'chayr it's pashut that you can't eat the B'chayr today? Amar Ravina, so Ravina answers, Lailam Kesava, really he holds like the second suggestion of the Gemara, that Kitchel Shaita v'loi Kitchel Asad Love, that the Kedusha was for the time, and in the future there is no Kedusha. You can't bring a carbon anymore. And what's the case? Like I mentioned, as Rashi explains, that the Gemara really knows this already in the question, that V'hacha, what are we talking about? B'b'chayr, shenizrek damai, it's a b'chayr that the blood was spread in the Mizbeach, kaidem chorban abayis, before the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. And then v'charav abayis, the chorban happens, v'adayim b'sarei kayim, and the kayin still has the meat of this b'chayr. And the question is, could you eat from this b'chayr or not? And here, it's obvious to the Tana of the Braisa that by b'chayr you can't, and then it wants to learn out, and the Brisa makes a hekish that we learn out Meiser from B'chayr, Meiser Sheni from B'chayr, that you can't eat it as well. And the Gemara explains, where is the source for B'chayr? Because umakshinon b'sarei l'domai. By the B'chayr, we compare the meat of the carbon, of the B'chayr, to the blood of it. Ma domai b'mizbeach, just like the blood has to be spread in the mizbeach, af b'sarei b'mizbeach. So too, in order to eat the basar of the B'chayr in Yerushalayim, it's only if there's a mizbeach there. Otherwise, it's not called Lefnei Hashem. That's really, in essence, the shaila of the Gemara over here. When you don't have the Mizbech, you don't have the Beis HaMikdash, there's no Kedusha. We're going here according to the Mandama that there's no Kedusha B'zman Hazeh. So, in such a case, what do I say about the status of Yerushalayim? Is Yerushalayim also not considered to be any more Lefnei Hashem? Or is it? So by B'chayr, it's not good. We compare the basar to the dam, that if you can't spray the blood on the Mizbech anymore, so you can't eat the basar anymore. And then the pasuk the Gemara brought before, where in the same pasuk it mentions Meiser and B'chayr, Umakish Meiser leB'chayr. We compare then Meiser Sheni to B'chayr, that just like B'chayr, you can't eat the basar b'zman hazeh, even though the blood was sprayed and brought when the Beis HaMikdash was still standing. The same by Meiser Sheni, that you don't eat it in Yerushalayim. It's not considered to be anymore Lefnei Hashem. That's the pshat in this brisa. Now, just to point out, this is all according to the Manda Amar that holds Kedusha Rishayna, the Kedusha is just L'shaita for that time, and Loi Kitchel Asad Lavai. But after the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, there's no Kedusha anymore. However, the Rambam paskins like the opinion that says that the Kedusha Rishayna is Kitchel L'shaita and Kitchel Asad Lavai. There is Kedusha even today as well. And according to the way Rashi is learning this Gemara, that would mean that according to that Manda Amar, Bisman Hazeh, you can eat Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim. Because the Beis HaMikdash still has Kedusha. You can't bring a carbon today because it's even though there's Kedusha the Beis HaMikdash today, but there's technical difficulties of bringing a carbon. You have to know the Makam HaMizbeach. You can't be Tmei Meis, and we don't have the Parah Duma today. That's why there's technical difficulties to bring a carbon today, even though the Kedusha is still there. But Benigay to Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim, according to the way Rashi is learning this Gemara, the Maskana is that only according to the Mandama, Loi Kitchel Asad Lavai, you can't eat the Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim. It's not Lefnei Hashem. But according to the Mandama that says that Kitchel Asad Lavai, you can bring the Meiser Sheni today in Yerushalayim and eat it there. But Taisvis has a completely different shot in the Gemara. We're not going to go through the whole thing. It's a long Taisvis. And Taisvis holds that L'kula Alma, even according to the Mandama that the Beis HaMikdash, the Kedusha remains today, you still cannot eat from the Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim. Okay, the Gemara continues. V'chi davar halamed behekish. Do you say regarding any matter of kachim that there's a halacha that doesn't say explicitly in the Torah? It's only being learned out with a hekish by comparing it to something else. Do I say that then chayzer umelamed behekish, that you could then take this thing that you learned out from a hekish and consider that not to be a source for something else that you're going to make a hekish too? That's what we're basically doing here. Regarding the status of the basar of the B'chayr, it doesn't say clearly in the Torah about eating it when there's no Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. But we're comparing the basar to the dam. That's one hekish. And then afterwards we're making a second hekish, that the Meiser Sheni is compared to the basar of the B'chayr, that you don't eat it in Yerushalayim. But the rule is, as Rashi brings it, the Gemara in Zvachim says that by Kachim, and the Gemara there brings a source for why this is, but by Kachim the rule is you cannot make one hekish, and then based on that halacha of that hekish, then learn a secondary hekish to something else. So how are we doing that here? So the Gemara answers, Meiser Dagon Chulinhu. The Meiser of grain that's brought to Yerushalayim, the Meiser Sheni, has a status of Chulin. Doesn't have the status of Kachim, where there's the halacha that you can't learn out from a secondary hekish. So the Gemara says, not necessarily is this a good answer, because this is a good answer according to the opinion there in Zvachim that says that regarding this rule of not making a secondary hekish, we look at the one that you're actually learning out in the end. As long as that's not kachim, you can learn it out with a secondary hekish. But according to the opinion, it says that you follow the source from where you're learning out from for that secondary hekish. In this case, you want to learn out Meiser Sheni from B'chayr. And it's according to him, as long as that is an inyan of kachim, you can't make a secondary hekish. So how here are we making a second hekish? And says the Gemara, dam ubasar chodem ilsihi. The dam ubasar, that's not considered to be a hekish. The reason why we're comparing them is because the blood and the meat is all from the same animal. That's why they're the same. They have the same halacha. It's not considered to be a hekish. And therefore there's only one hekish here in the pasuk where we're comparing the ma'aser, the gancha, to b'chayris b'char karacha, and therefore you can learn it out. It's one hekish. Okay, going back to the Mishnah said, this was the second Mishnah here in the Pedic, Mishnah before in Daf Yud Zayin, and Mishnah said that kochim, that you eat outside of the kloyim, which is outside the curtains that was in the Mishkan, or the outside of the Azara as well. And it also mentioned the Ma'aseh Sheni outside the wall of Yerushalayim. So you get Malkus for this. So the Gemara asks on this, Tanina Chodezimne, why does it say this here in this Mishnah, the second Mishnah of this Pedic? It already said this point in the first Mishnah of the Pedic. There it said, Ma'aseh Sheni v'hektish, Shalei niftu. Ma'aseh Sheni and hektish that was not redeemed. And seemingly what it's saying is that if it was eaten out of its place, out of the walls of the Azara or outside Yerushalayim, that you get Malkus. Why is it saying in this Mishnah a second time? Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says, no, it's two different cases. Seifa, the second case is taka, like we said, b'Ma'aseh Sheni tohor. It's Ma'aseh Sheni that's pure, v'gavra tohor, and the person is also tohor. And what is he doing? V'ka'achol chutz l'chayma, and he's eating it outside the wall of Yerushalayim or outside the wall of the Azara. However, Reisha, when it mentions in the first Mishnah, the Ma'aseh Sheni and the hektish shaloi niftu, it doesn't specify what the person did. Over there, it's speaking about something else. But Ma'aseh Sheni tomei, the Ma'aseh Sheni is tomei. The gavra tamei, or the person is tamei. The ka'achalev Yerushalayim, he's eating it inside Yerushalayim. It's not redeemed, and he's eating it inside Yerushalayim, but he's tamei, and therefore he gets malchus for this. That's what it's talking about. So the Gemara asks, where's the source in the pasuk that if one eats from the Ma'aseh Sheni when he's tamei, that he gets malchus? The Tanya we learned in the Braisa. Rab Shimon says, it says in the pasuk, in the mitzvah of bir maisris, once in 3 years, you have to be mizvada, to confess and to say that you fulfilled the mitzvah and gave all the maisris in their time and so on. And it says there also, leviarti mimenu b'tomei, I did not get rid of it, I did not consume it when I was tomei. What does the tomei here mean? Bein sha'ani tomei, whether the person was tomei, v'hu toir, and the meiser was toir, bein sha'ani toir, or the person was toir, v'hu tomei, and the meiser is tomei. So here you see that the right way to eat is when the person is tired and the meiser is tired. But v'heichan muzar al achila. Where is the warning? Where is the actual azhara? Where is the lav for eating it when the person is tamei that he would get malchus? So the Braisa says, "Any ideya." I don't know where the source for this is. Now the Gemara interjects and asks on this, "What do you mean you don't know?" There's a clear pasuk. Tumas haguf. Behead yiksiv. If a person is tamei and he eats from Ma'aseh Sheni, there's a clear pasuk that he gets malchus. Pasuk says, "Never shashatiga boy." A person that touches a dead body becomes tamei v'tama da orev, or not a dead body. Sorry, he touches something that makes him tamei for that day, and he becomes tamei ada orev. V'lo yochel min hakotchim. You should not eat from kotchim. Now the continuation of the pasuk there it says, "Kim rochatz b'sorei b'mayim," until he goes into the mikveh. Then he could eat. So Rashi explains that because it says in this pasuk that as soon as he goes into the mikveh, he comes out of the mikveh, he can eat from this. So we know that it's not talking about kochim, as it would seem. The pasuk says kochim. It's not talking about a carbon, or it's not talking about truma, because there you have to wait to eat until at night after you go to the mikveh. So therefore we know that Rashi brings the Gemara in Yevamah says this pasuk is talking about Ma'aseh Sheni. So right here is the azhara in the pasuk that v'lo yochal, you should not eat until he is mitayed himself in water in the mikveh. Okay, now till here is the Pirush of Rashi in the Gemara. If you look on the side, it says Rabbeinu Gufay Tor v'Yotza Nishmosei B'Tara LePirish Yoisa Mikam Ve'elech Loshen Talmidei Rabbi Yehuda bar Abnasan. He was the Talmud of Rashi, and he was actually also a son-in-law from Rashi, and he was mefarish the remainder of the Masechta almost till the end. I think, and then in the end you have a little bit from Rabbeinu Gershom. Am I right? If I remember correctly,
Who takes it?
maybe.
First one?
We shall see.
Yvonne.
Yeah, a little bit in the end, you have from Rabbeinu Gershom. This is the Rivon. That's what he's known as. Yeah, from here forward. Okay, so the Gemara brought a clear source for this, that if a person is tamei and he eats from Ma'aseh Sheni, there's a hazara, you get malchus. So Elo, what was the question of this Braisa? Tumas atzmai minayin. What's the source that if the Ma'aseh Sheni is tamei and the person is tired and he eats from it, that he would get malchus? Because the pasuk says, now simply this pasuk is speaking about Ma'aseh Sheni, saying that you should not eat it outside of Yerushalayim. But this term b'sharecha, the Gemara will learn out something else regarding this halacha of eating when it's tamei. Because another pasuk, it says b'sharecha techlenu atame v'atar yachtov. That's what it says there afterwards in the pasuk, yachtov. And what's that pasuk talking about? It's talking about the b'chor, that you can eat it whether you're Tomei or you're Tar. In Vitanya Devei Rabbi Shmuel, we learned Rabbi Shmuel said, Afilu Tomei, V'Tor, Oichlin, B'Kaira Achas, a kohen that's Tomei, one that's Tar, they can eat together in the same bowl, V'Ein Choshishin. And there's no chash for this. They can eat it however they want, even when they're Tomei. Now, there it also uses that term, Bisharecha. Bisharecha, they can eat Techlenu. Both Tomei and Tar. So over here, when it says, Leisuchalechol Bisharecha, do not eat it like that Bisharecha. We're comparing it to the other Bisharecha. What is it saying? What the Torah is saying here is, Heich Tomei, Disharilecha, Gabitar Hasam, that halacha that is allowed there, that you could eat the Tomei together with the Tar, there by the B'chayr, Hacha Loiseichol. Here, you should not eat it in that same way as the term Bisharecha was written in another place by the B'chayr. Here, Bisharecha is saying, Bisharecha, do not eat it in your gates like there, where you eat it while it's Tameh. That's the source, that if it's Tameh, you're going to get Malkus. Yeah, because over there, by the B'chayr, it's not only when the person is Tameh. Over there, it's when the B'chayr itself becomes Tameh. They're eating it in the same bowl, and he's been Tameh the B'chayr itself. And therefore, we learn out from there to here that when it's Tameh, the person gets Malkus. Okay, now the Gemara asks another Shaila regarding Ma'aseh Sheni, Uminalon the bar pediyahu. This Ma'aseh Sheni that became Tameh, so you can't eat it, so what do you do with it? It's in Yerushalayim already, and it's Tameh. How do we know that it could be redeemed? And then the money, you buy with it other things to eat. Rabbi Lazar says, from where do I know that Ma'aseh Sheni that's already in Yerushalayim and it's Tameh? That you could redeem it. So not the Chiddush over here is usually by Ma'aseh Sheni, the halacha is you could only redeem it till you bring it into Yerushalayim. Once it's in Yerushalayim, you can't redeem it anymore. But here, the Gemara is saying, but in a case where in Yerushalayim it became Tameh, you could redeem it. From where do we know? And that's a filu Yerushalayim. When it speaks about redeeming the Ma'aseh Sheni, it says because you're not able to se'esa. Not a simple taisha se'esa would mean you can't carry it. When you can't carry it to Yerushalayim, so then you're paid it with money. But here the Gemara darshans, the term se'esa means something else. Se'es means and you can't eat it, and because it's tameh. How do we know se'es means achila? Shenema va'yisam maseis me'es panav, and he carried the food from in front of him. This is by the brothers of Yosef. Right, when he gave them food. So mases, and over here se'es means eating, food. So if you can't eat it, it's tameh, you can redeem it even when it's in Yerushalayim. Amar Rabbi learned out, said in the name of Rabbi, what do you learn out from this pasuk? From where do you know regarding the Ma'aseh Sheni, which is Tar? That it can be redeemed. It can be redeemed until you bring it to Yerushalayim, outside. And even if it's one step outside Yerushalayim, it could still be redeemed. Because the pasuk says, you're not able to carry it, which means that it's outside, and you're not carrying it in. As long as it's outside, when it's tar, that's when you can redeem it. So we're learning out from the same pasuk a second halacha, two halachas here. So the Gemara asks, how can you learn out two halachas? We need this pasuk to teach what Rabbi Lazar said, that when the Ma'aseh Sheni is tameh in Yerushalayim, you could redeem it. Answers the Gemara, no, imkain. If that would be the only thing we learn out from here, that if you can't eat it, the term for achila, the regular term, eating. Why does he use the term se'esai? Se'esai also means carrying. That's why we know to learn out also this halacha that Rabasi said, that it's coming to speak about the regular halacha of redeeming Ma'aseh Sheni when it's tar outside Yerushalayim and you're not carrying it in. If so, say the opposite. Maybe the pasuk is only coming to teach this, that if it's outside, before you carried it in, that you can redeem it when it's tar. How do you know to learn out also the halacha of Ma'aseh Sheni that's tameh in Yerushalayim, that you can redeem it? Because in Kain, le'mekra le'sucha litlay. Regarding taking it and bringing it into Yerushalayim, the more common term would be litlay. Litlay would mean to take it in Yerushalayim. There would be no way to explain that it would mean eating. Why does it use the term se'esai? They can be translated in two different ways. It can mean carrying and it can mean eating. Shmamina tarti. The Torah used this term to learn how to teach both points. Outside Yerushalayim, you redeem it when it's tar. When it's brought into Yerushalayim, only if it becomes tameh, then you're allowed to redeem it. Dr. Gemara Yosef, Rav Chanine, Rav Hoshiyeh, the Kamibaylo, Apischi Yerushalayim. Or they were sitting at Pischi Yerushalayim, they were sitting by the entrance of Yerushalayim and had the following shaila. And this is the point there is the Gemara is going to address is regarding this halacha that Ma'aseh Sheni, when it's tar, could only be redeemed when it's outside Yerushalayim, not after it's brought inside. So they started off like this. Pshita, this is obvious. Hu bachutz. If the person himself is standing outside, and the package that he's carrying is in front of him, and the package already, he's right by the wall of Yerushalayim, and the package went in, even though he's standing outside. Koltu mechitzis. It already was taken in by the mechitzis, and therefore it cannot be redeemed anymore. Hu b'fnim masoi b'chutz. If the person is standing inside, and his package of mice is behind him, on his back, and it's still outside, mahu. What's the halach in such a case? Do you say that because he's inside, so therefore the package is like with the person, and therefore it's like already inside the city, you can't redeem it anymore? Or no, the package is outside, so it could be redeemed. So Ta'anulu Sabe b'debei Reb Shimon ben Yochi, an elder by Reb Shimon ben Yochi, said and taught based on the pasuk where it says about redeeming the Ma'aseh Sheni, ki yirchak mimcha amokim, that if the place Yerushalayim is far from you, and then that's the pasuk where it says ki lo yisuchal se'esoi, so then you could redeem it. So what do we learn from this? Mimcha means bimiluacha, from you and whatever you're carrying with you, everything that fills you, whatever you have. And therefore what it means is that only if the person is completely outside Yerushalayim with his package, then he could redeem it. If the package of the Ma'aseh Sheni is in Yerushalayim, then it can't be redeemed, obviously. But even if the package is still outside, but he's inside, it also cannot be redeemed, because he's not mimcha mimuluacha, he's not completely outside. By Rav Papa, so now based on this, Rav Papa asks, Nakat le bekanya mai. What if the person is not carrying the package on him, like on a knapsack, whatever, but he's carrying it on a long stick that's behind him on his shoulders, and then on the end of that stick there's a bag or a package with the Ma'aseh Sheni. What's the halacha in such a case? It's not mamish on his body itself. It's not on his shoulders. It's on a stick that's on his shoulders. So maybe it's more removed from him, and even if he's in Yerushalayim, the Ma'aseh Sheni is still outside, you would be able to redeem it. Taiko, the Gemara doesn't answer this shaila. This remains unresolved.
Rabbi.